So, I've been tagged. Alright, I'll play along. The premise is that what if you could go back in time and give yourself 5 pieces of advice to improve your game mastery? Well, I don't really believe that there are any genuine shortcuts, and even if I did believe an older version of myself about what made good game mastery when I was my younger self, I don't really think that would have saved me any time, because we're talking about skill, I still would have had to practice. I still would have had had access to the kind of people that would make that practice fruitful, and so on. But, and there's also the expression, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And while I think a lot of people misinterpret that to mean, something along the lines of fate, that this person will show up and begin training you when you're ready, really it just means before you're ready. It doesn't matter what you've been exposed to. Anyway, what 5 pieces of advice would I give myself? I guess I would base this in things that, looking back now, I regret in some way. Not so much about skills. Every mistake that I made taught me something, and so I don't think I'd want to try and circumvent those mistakes, and I don't think that my progress through learning how to be a GM could get any faster than it was, because I like to experiment with so many things. If I had stuck to one game or something, then I'd probably answer this question differently. But as I've constantly been exploring new games, I think my path was as fast as it would be. So, to address regrets, my first point, the first piece of advice, would be to read more. Buy more core books, even the ones that I wasn't sure about back then, because there would come a time, decades later, when I would regret not having it and would be completely unable to find it. And to buy far fewer scenario books, splat books, and to be more discerning about supplements. Looking back now over the 3 decades of my gaming, I have to say that things like that, particularly the splat books, have contributed so little to my enjoyment that they were actually detrimental. Looking back, they were detrimental. Some of them were so badly written or so focused on just adding some kind of cool power to a particular group, or breaking stereotypes that the designer thought were stupid with stereotypes that were even worse. I mean, there is so much crap in these game lines, and for the sake of completeness and maybe a sense of optimism that maybe there'd be something in the pages that would make the purchase worth it, I bought them all. I bought complete lines of so many games. And, these days I kind of feel like they weigh me down. You can't really see it based on the collection I've got here. But it's just box after box after box of books that the predominant response was frustration or disappointment. So I would definitely counsel myself to stick with my instincts, which I ignored at the time, and stick to core books. The second piece of advice I would give myself is to have gotten involved with conventions. I wish now, where I live now and have lived for, 17 years, I don't really have genuine access to gaming conventions, and I would enjoy building up the skill to be able to, under that kind of pressure with all the noise and the time limits and the you can't choose your players situation, and I'd enjoy that experience, and I wish that I had it to a greater degree than I have. So, getting involved in conventions is something I should have done, and so if I could go back and talk to a younger me, I'd I'd urge him to go to the conventions that he had access to. More of them, and participate. The third piece of advice that I would give myself is to, in a similar vein, have taken the games and the game systems that I was developing and we were playtesting or we were talking about, and actually write them up and actually have shared them. I should have exposed myself to that kind of gamer, the one who's interested in making their own system, the one who's actually making their system, the one who carries it through to actually writing it out. I shouldn't have been discouraged by similar products being out there or similar systems being developed. I mean, when I look at Cortex now, the basic premise of Cortex is something that I had developed on my own in the 80s without any kind of exposure to anything like it. And, we played it a handful of sessions, liked it, I thought I'd work on the setting, and then that setting that I had paired with those mechanics, I found on the shelf, already packaged, great art, that sort of thing, and I just said, screw this. And I tossed that by the wayside. Never taking my game ideas to talk to other like-minded fledgling designers. Now that I'm older, I don't really have much interest in designing games anymore. I'm more focused on building interesting settings or making settings come to life. And so maybe those days are behind me, and I should have taken the opportunities based on the technologies of the day to have explored that. The fourth piece of advice I have for myself would be to have opened my table to more younger gamers. I usually played with people my age or older. And so I was in a position to learn from some of the older gamers something, right? Maybe about their specialty or their interests or games that they had played if they'd been playing longer than I had, and that sort of thing. And of course, with your peers, you learn different ways to play and different ways to approach the mechanics. But we also owe it to the people coming up behind us to teach them what we've been exposed to. Because as I look around, I see, that it's the indie games that are keeping alive some of the different ways that we had to play. Like if you look at Dungeon World, this is just best practices of, original D&D. Recast in this entirely new mold that isn't going to give you the same learning process that those early games gave us. It'll give you a great experience, just like those early games gave us a great experience, but where you're going to go from there is different. And so whole game styles are vanishing. Whole new game styles are coming in. And I should have given younger people access to games that, were already unavailable to them to buy, and now they just have these vague recollections of by name, maybe. They never had a chance to play. The older I get and the more time I spend away from large groups of gamers, the more I feel like I never had a chance to play Game X is one of the saddest things that anybody can say. The fifth piece of advice, the final piece of advice that I would give to myself is to start journaling, or when blogging becomes available in your timeline, to have started blogging and vlogging earlier, because actually externalizing this stuff to strangers, not to your game group who is going through a similar process and is too close to those particular ideas or issues or whatever that you're trying to develop or trying to work through or trying to solve or trying to improve. To get those ideas out there with people that you don't know, who can challenge your thinking or give you that missing puzzle piece, or just say the right thing at the right time that everything catches fire and you get inspired and figure out what you're going to do next. I should have done that earlier, waiting until 2010 to venture out into sharing my ideas with a larger group. It was late. It should have come earlier. So those are my 5 pieces of advice for myself to benefit this tag video. I hope something I've said has had some value to those who listened. As an addendum, if, Rhaegar, you are the big fan of time travel that you say you are, you will have seen this film. If you haven't seen this film, see this film. Primer.